Hello, and welcome to A Critical Dragon, where I talk about narrative in film, television, and in books. And today I am joined by two incredibly special guests, Lana Bachynski and Jeff Cannata of the DLC Bookclub, who are doing their reading of Stephen Erikson's Malazan Book of the Fallen. Good morning, Lana.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having us here today. We are pumped.
And good morning to you, Jeff. And people should know the reason I said Jeff that way was Jeff was late.
I was late. I wear the cone of shame. I apologize. My children, I'll blame my children. I'm throwing them right under the bus. Blaming my children.
That's why children are there. They are there for their spare organs and to throw under the bus as an excuse any other time.
Indeed. And I hope to use them for both of those purposes at someday. But I want to say right at the top that the only reason that our little show, the DLC Book Club, exists is because of your channel and your discussions with Stephen Erikson and your enthusiasm for Malazan. And I have loved your channel for a long time, and it's part of the reason that I was even interested in tackling this massive series.
Well, if the lighting was better, you would see how much I'm blushing. Thank you very much for saying that, because one of the things I wanted to ask was, of all of the things to launch the book club with, you chose a series that, admittedly, I don't think is as difficult as people say. But you chose a series that is somewhat known for being difficult and being a little obtuse or opaque. So I was going to ask, what made you sort of launch this whole book club with Gardens of the Moon?
Well, I'll throw it over to you, Lana, in just a second.
Yeah.
But I love for you to describe the pitch that I gave to you, because honestly, we have a little song that starts our episode that we dance to every week. That was written by Lana's sister, and it is delightful. But it also really sums up the exact reasons for it. It really was like I needed somebody to hold me on task. I'd been wanting to try Gardens of the Moon and the whole Malazan Book of the Fallen for a long time, but unless I'm making content around something, I won't hold myself to task. So anyway, Lana, you describe the pitch that I came to you with.
So if you're just meeting Jeff and I for the first time, we are Jeff has another show called DLC Main, and then we have a Wednesday show. And that is the main show's about video games, but on Wednesdays we sort of talk about anything. And we ended up talking about books a lot on that show together, until one day after the show, Jeff goes, "There's a book I've been meaning to read. I really want to read it, but I don't have like the consistency in myself unless I'm making content about it to read the book. So do you want to just do something really chill and fun where you and I read the book together and have a book club, but for my sanity, we just record it and we can just throw it on YouTube and it'll be fine?" And I was like, okay, what are the books? And Jeff goes, "The most notoriously challenging fantasy novels of all time." To which at the time I was like, is that code for poorly written? Which I'm so happy to say it is not. And then right when we started, Jeff looked it up, and I think you said it was on your Goodreads list for literally, you added it 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And you've just been like dreaming about reading them ever since. So,
and then I had children in there, and again, I'm going to throw them right under the bus, and they get in the way of reading. But
yeah,
but the
just
funny
too
thing,
busy being a good father and playing with his kids,
mediocre
to make
father.
content.
The funniest part about this story, though, AP, is that I said, "Hey, Lana, I would love to start this book club so that I have a reason to read, and you can keep me on task. And we love talking about books, and Lana loves reading, and I love talking about fantasy with her. And so I was like, we could do all kinds of things, but let's start with this one, and we'll start with Gardens of the Moon. If we don't like it, we can move on." And Lana's like, "I bought the complete Malazan Book of the Fallen. We're doing all of them." And I was like, whoa, wait, we don't even know. She's like, "It's 10 books. We're doing all of them." And I went, but thankfully, right away, we both fell in love with Erikson's prose and got pulled into that world immediately. And so, yeah, we're just about to start the fourth novel, House of Chains, and we see no reason to stop before we complete the entire series.
And I have to admit that it's impressive. One of the things I love about the modern day, all of this like YouTube and various things where people can have virtual book clubs. Because like I remember back, maybe Jeff, you might remember this. Lana, you are far too young to remember this.
Oh my God.
But when you read a book, you then had to go and like physically find people to talk to, and then like, being poor, like sharing the book around and having to wait until everyone else had read it, getting it out of the library. And now we can have these online discussions about the books that we love, the books that we enjoy, and you get people from all over the world, and we can have this big communal sort of experience of it, which is so much fun. Seeing the two of you not only go through your read, but encouraging others and the engagement in the comments, and having a Discord where people get together to discuss where you are at the book, but also where they are, and it's just a fantastic aspect of the positive aspects of social media and the modern age.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, Jeff and I have actually never met in person. Yeah, I mean, we've known
true.
each other.
It doesn't feel like that's true, but it is true.
Know. It's been like 3 years ago since we first like did a podcast together, and I mean, how close I feel with Jeff, and like looking forward to like, oh, I wonder what X, Y, or Z person is going to say in the comments this week, and looking forward to people posting their favorite sentences. It really does feel like we have a book club. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and one of the coolest things, honestly, is that, which I did not anticipate, is that we've sort of been welcomed into this larger Malazan community online. And one of the coolest things is that folks that are interacting with us that know the books inside and out and are just kind of enjoying us going in through the thing they already love, and they're helping us decide how many chapters to read per episode, and all of that stuff is so cool that I thought, hey, well, maybe we'll be able to bring some other folks that had never read these before, and we'd all kind of go through it together. I did not anticipate the people that already know and love the series kind of guiding us along and enjoying our first glimpse into the world.
I think you had actually mentioned it on one of the DLCs that you were so grateful that people weren't spoiling the series for you. They weren't revealing things ahead of time. And I have to admit, this is one of the things I love about the Malazan community. And I think anyone who makes videos on it really tries very hard not to spoil big reveals or anything like that that's going to happen later on, because you want people to experience it. You want people to have that moment for themselves. And it is so difficult when, it's a big sprawling series to sort of go, no, I have to limit myself just to comments on where you currently are. And in fact, that's why I stopped making anything that had to, or making comments that had anything to do with what you were kind of currently reading. Because I went, even if I try not to do it, sometimes you give away something unintentionally. Sort of like, for instance, this is one of my favorite characters. When a character gets introduced, this is one of my favorite characters in the whole series. And you're like, well, that kind of implies a level of importance to that character. And so even something as subtle as that can, for someone who hasn't read it yet, you don't want to ruin that experience for them, but you want them to feel included.
Yeah. It's been awesome to see how the Discord has self-policed in that way. They're so kind and so concerned about our, keeping our precious experience. And I'm so touched by that. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah. Sometimes I log in and I just see somebody saying, sorry, I'll move it to a different channel. And I'm like, I wonder what I missed. Details.
I actually have a question for you, AP. This is something that I've never heard you mention. Maybe you have, and maybe I just haven't seen it, but I'm wondering how you came to Malazan. Were you reading the novels as they were coming out?
So you haven't heard the story about how I met Stephen Erikson?
I think I heard you met him at a convention. Is that right? Or am I
at a conference?
Yes.
To very briefly go through it, as a young graduate student studying fantasy, my PhD in fantasy, I'd gone to this conference in Florida, an academic conference, so not a convention, but a bunch of academics, bunch of authors there. And because I was flying over from the UK, I'd arrived early. And I happened to know who the president of the the conference was, and she had said, "We're meeting up with Stephen Donaldson tomorrow for lunch. Would you like to join us?" Because I was there a couple of days early. I was like, Stephen Donaldson, the amazing Lord Foylesbane, the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, like one of the big things in epic fantasy, like one of the things that I am studying. Of course, I would like to. So I came down to said, we're meeting in the lobby at 1 o'clock. So I come down. And of course, this is before the conference starts. No one is wearing a name tag. And now, Lana, again, you might find this difficult to understand, but this was back before you could just easily look things up online to see. Yeah, if you remember this time period.
Yes, very well.
The world was still in sepia. They hadn't invented color yet.
That's right.
And so there's this crowd of people there, and I only knew the president and her partner. And she said, "Here's Steve," and goes around and so I'm sort of going, "Oh, Steve, this must be Stephen Donaldson." Stephen Donaldson had been the second Steve introduced. Stephen Erikson was the first Steve introduced.
Too many Steves.
So as we walked out to go to this restaurant, I'm standing next to Steve, who I'm assuming is Stephen Donaldson, and was not. And going, your books are so impressive. Like the approach that you took was so innovative and was moving the genre on. Like all things that are true for the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant.
Yeah,
but also true. But also true for the Malazan Book of the Fallen. And it was only when we were actually sitting down at lunch, because Steve and I are having this quite interesting conversation then about the genre and about movements in the genre. And someone then went, "Donaldson." And Donaldson, of course, looks up and goes, "What?" And I'm like, who have I been talking to?
That's incredible.
So funny.
So over the course of that conference, then I obviously then found out who Stephen Erikson was, and he gave me a couple of his. He happened to have a couple of copies of the Bocklin and Corbel Broach novellas. He happened to have a couple. He said, "Here you go," and he inscribed them to me, and it was great. So when I flew back, I went and I bought the the Malazan Book of the Fallen up to that point that had been published, and I started Gardens of the Moon, and I was in the middle of doing my PhD, and I went, "Actually, I don't have time for this," because I was reading and I was going, "No, I need to focus on," and then I had a bit of a break, and I went, "Right, I'm going to read Gardens of the Moon," and I started it again, and I went, I don't have the brain power for this at the minute. I'm too focused on that. And then I picked it up the third time, and I went, "You know what? I'm just going to read it. I don't need to try and understand everything. I'm just going to read it." And I was absolutely enthralled. And from that point on, then I went, right, I want to read all of these. I want to read all of these books. And then Stephen Erikson came to the conference again the next year, and we struck up a friendship then, because you're like, "Oh, Steve, actual Steve."
All the things I said about your books are actually true.
Thankfully. But that was the beginning.
That's incredible.
That was the beginning of the two of us becoming friends, and me reading his books and becoming a fan of his writing and a fan of his style. And it led to some really interesting avenues for me to pursue when I was doing my PhD. So I'm very thankful for that, even though it's incredibly embarrassing to admit this in public.
That's wonderful.
It's a fantastic story.
Lana, did you catch in there that we've been pronouncing a character's name wrong?
I did. Yeah, I caught that. I was like, "Oh, yes, that's exactly how we say it too." He's definitely not French to us.
Beauchalon.
Yeah, we've been saying Beauchalon.
Ah oui, bonjour.
One of the great things about the modern day, when we can speak to the authors, some authors you say, "Oh, I love this character," and you'll hear them pronounce it, and you go, "That's not how I've been pronouncing it in my head to other people, in videos I've recorded, in entire essays I've devoted to this." Right, let me just subtly change how I now pronounce that.
Go back and re-upload all the videos with like it dubbed over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But have there been, because you've had a chance to speak to Erikson, were there any things that he said during that you went, whoops?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
constantly.
like 4 or 5 things.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember any of them now, but there's one that even it was like where the emphasis was in the word that just changed. It was like we had the right syllables but the wrong emphasis. And I was like, oh yeah, that does sound.
He calls her Felicin.
Felicin, yeah.
Yeah, but Erikson's wrong. Like, just ignore everything that comes out of that man's mouth.
One of the things that I think is so amazing about him is that he clearly puts so much thought and energy and care into his writing, but he's so not precious about that stuff. Like I would assume that somebody that cared that much would care that much, right? Would want everybody to get it right. And the fact that he's like, don't worry, however you pronounce it's fine. I find that to be actually quite charming and surprising.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think this is one of the things that we see about, and you'll know this from all of the different authors that you speak to. Like, they love their work. They've devoted all this time to their work. But ultimately, when it goes out into the wild, they go, yeah, but now the readers get to read it, to understand it, to do their thing with it. And if they're getting the major stuff that goes across, then how they pronounce a word, what's that in the grand scheme of things?
Right.
But Lana and I were even talking before you tardily showed up about pronunciation of names, that even in real life, where I could tell someone my name, but because of my accent or because of how I pronounce it, they might hear a very different thing. And you go, but at the end of the day, I know that they're not talking to the person standing next to me, and they're not deliberately getting my name wrong. It's how it makes sense to them. And you always try, but you try to extend the courtesy, but we are aware we're all imperfect human beings. And with the written word, how many times in your life have you been reading stuff and then you hear a word in conversation, you go, is that how that's pronounced?
Yeah. Yes.
Distinct memories of that as a child. The first time I said gigantic out loud, and I'll never forget
gigantic.
It.
What about melee? That's not how that word should be pronounced.
It has an accent on one of the E's, doesn't it?
Yeah, but like there's one E and then there's two E's. Why are they pronounced the same? If you have it doesn't make any sense to me at all.
I know. See, it's the French Canadian. Two E's, it's an A.
Yeah.
Well, aren't all Canadian words ending in A?
Yeah, I heard myself say it. I heard myself say it.
Well, one question I had for the both of you, because you're both heavily involved in gaming in different regards. Because Lana, you are involved in computer game production and design and that approach to gaming, and I believe Jeff likes sitting around with imaginary little people in his head and the little figurines on a tabletop. Would that be a fair or semi-accurate?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Lana is an educated professional who makes a good living from video games, and I'm a little silly person that just dances around, and that's accurate.
Yeah, Jeff, you and I have a lot more in common about this. The educated professional who knows all of the stuff, that would be Lana. Then we're dabbling amateurs.
Exactly.
When it comes to the perception of narrative and storytelling in fantasy, like what we perceive in games, because there are so many fantasy games and different approaches that way, or what we see in role-playing games, it's a different way of approaching storytelling. A different emphasis, as Lana pointed out earlier. So the first sort of question I had was, what surprised you about your preconceptions or assumptions about, say, the Malazan Book of the Fallen, this big genre fantasy text that you're going to read, that when you started reading it, were there any assumptions that you had that were challenged? In terms of the writing, in terms of the style, in terms of the tone or focus, or any of those sorts of things? Like, Lana, was there anything, because you've read fantasy, that you have preconceptions?
I think the biggest preconception that was challenged is is, you know, the notoriety of it's the most challenging book that's ever been read in the fantasy genre, or ever been written in the fantasy genre. And immediately I'm like, okay, but like, what makes it so challenging? And I think immediately it's like, oh, I don't think it's as challenging as that. I can see, because of, you know, the fact that everything isn't handed to you, and there are things that are teed up to get paid off way later, and there's not an expectation to parse exactly what's on every page, like literally and instantly. I see like the challenging parts of it, but immediately, I mean, I said it earlier, I was like, is this code for it's poorly written, and so you have to like slog through it. That was like the first thing right away that was challenged, to be like, what does this really mean? But the other, I think, is about like a lot of the fantasy that I have consumed in the past is a lot more literal. It is more about the story that you're reading. And in this case, it's a story, but it feels so engaging because it's also like a puzzle. And I think how enriched I am by the discussion of it, which is something I didn't expect at all. I think I've mentioned it on the show a couple times. I think in our first episode, I'm like, I'm not really like a reader in the way, like, I don't do like English. I don't know all the right words for like, oh, cool adjectives. I couldn't tell you which one an adjective is. Like, that's not like things.
She thought
that
a book
stuck
club was
with
about
me.
diagramming a sentence, AP. That's what she thought the book club was.
That, yeah. So
We're going to diagram all these sentences. Welcome to the book club. Sorry.
Isn't a book club where you take a book and you hit small people with it? Like,
yes.
It's a book club.
Yes. Yeah, that's actually.
And hey, the Malazan books are very good clubs. They're quite large.
But I think just like how enriching and how much I can like really feel like I could sink my teeth into every sort of section of the book was something I wasn't expecting, because I didn't know anything about it other than it was supposed to be really hard. And that's like kind of a trite answer, I feel like, to the question. But
no, but it's not trite. It's an honest answer. Like, that's all we ever try to do when we have conversations is, you know, this is the thing that I felt.
yeah. But what about you, Jeff?
Well, I agree with a lot of what you said. One of the things that Lana and I talked about a lot when we were just sort of talking about books, because, you know, you latch on, you find somebody's a reader and you automatically like, oh, well, let's talk about books. And we talked a lot about books before we ever started doing the show together. And one of the things that we both commiserated about was that all too frequently in the genre fiction that we liked, we couldn't find great prose, like truly transcendent singing prose. And I'm somebody that I love language. I fell in love with language as a young person. I studied theater and acting, and I loved speaking wonderful words, and that's kind of what, you know, I fell in love with Shakespeare, and I love language. And all too frequently, I'll have somebody recommend a novel, and perhaps the story is engaging and fun, but the prose itself isn't as transportive. It isn't as, you know, as high quality as I would hope. And so one of the things that I think I immediately latched onto is just Erikson's command of language and his ability to, you know, use words in ways that I found completely overwhelming. I mean, that's part of the reason we didn't set out to feature our favorite sentences as like we didn't sit down and go, that'll be a part of the show. That happened completely organically, just because we were both so taken by the use of language in these novels. And so that first of all, like right off the top, that's my favorite thing about reading, is just how these novels are written and how insightful they are, and how an idea or a concept is so poetically illustrated. But I will say the other thing that I think really challenged my expectation, and this is something Lana and I have talked about a lot as well, is I think both of us, having come from, you know, loving fantasy genre across numerous mediums, including video games, is that I think we sat down with Gardens of the Moon and we went, okay, Empire is bad. Empires are
Yes.
bad. Imperialism is bad. Okay, so those are the bad guys. Who are the good guys? People working against the empire. Oh, Lysine, bad. And you sort of like try to put things into clearly defined columns or buckets or whatever. And Erikson is constantly telling you, no, you challenge your assumptions. Guess what? Things are more complicated than that. Guess what? Good people are good on both sides of a line. And even up through the third novel where we're like, okay, well, at least we know the Panion Doman is bad, right? At least there's one thing I know is that these are unredeemable, and the fact that he is constantly playing with that and showing you how, compassion and humanity can be expressed across, in this genre, using tropes that other authors have used in such a blunt way. He is finding nuance in it that I think is so surprising and always forces me to check myself and reanalyze what I've read. It's amazing.
And I think that's one of the assumptions I think a lot of people make, particularly if they're not fans of fantasy, where they go, oh, well, it's childish, it's simplistic, it's there's a moral, it's the good guys versus the bad guys. And in the genre there are a lot of stories that do that, but then there's a whole host of other stories that don't. But when you're standing outside it, when you don't experience them, that can be a dismissive attitude, particularly when, if you look at any of the polls of sort of the top fantasy novels of all time, look at the number of children's fantasy texts.
Yeah.
But if you said, oh, what are the top science fiction novels of all time? Very rarely will you find children's science fiction there. Top horror novels, it generally isn't necessarily the children or teenage horror novels.
Yeah.
Top literary fiction, it's not going to be for the YA audience. But for some reason with fantasy, so many of them, because I think we get attracted to a lot of fantastic storytelling when we are younger, and then we grow out of it. Admittedly, I've extended my adolescence as far as physically possible until such point where I can no longer argue about it. But for me, seeing the breadth of the genre and all of the different types of fantasy that we can have, I love finding these texts, these authors that do something differently. Like Guy Gavriel Kay's lyricism, the way that he writes, he has beautiful lyrical writing, and again, very tightly controlled. Johnny Wirtz has this extraordinary vocabulary and ability to shape the language on the page. And then you can go back to Ursula Le Guin and Lee Brackett or Gene Wolfe, that there are authors out there who have or are still writing incredible books. And it's when we have, as you pointed out, Jeff, these sort of buckets, these categories, these nice, simple definitions that we plunk things in. The authors that kick down those divides, that break up those ghettos, those are the works that I find the most engaging. Does that kind of make sense?
Oh, no, 100%.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
I think I've talked, I always feel bad sort of repeating myself because I talk a lot about it on our show and I've mentioned it a couple other times, but one of the things that I think like elevates this the Malazan books is this sense of trust that I feel like Steven Erikson has with the person reading his book, who to care about these things and to pick up on them and to make that experience something of their own, like connect with it on a level that is not just the words on a page, and like tying it into like video game development and how it feels like being an art director in video games or an animator. Like the player is as much a character in the game that you're presenting, and the games I like to make, as is the character that you're presenting the player with. And the intention that a player has when they press that button, there's a lot of story that you don't have to tell because of what they're bringing. In animation, we say there's principles of animation. One of them is anticipation. You get a cartoon character doing a big wind up before the punch. And that's to like prime the audience so that they're prepared for the action that's about to happen. But in video games, the player is the anticipation. They know that punch is going to happen because they're thinking about it. They press the button and they just want the punch to happen. And I think in that way where the story is not like, oh, my character did this cool thing. They say, I did this thing. And it's they're invested in this way. I feel like the story that I have in my relationship with Erikson's books, I feel trusted. I feel like I'm a part of it, not in that it's like, ooh, self-insertion, but like I have my own reader story of reading these books. And the story of me sharing Malazan with my friends and talking about the story is as much impactful to me as telling about like my journey of being like, are these books going to be bad? My discovery of like reading through things, how smart I feel putting these puzzle pieces together and like finding little nuggets that I'm trying to look ahead to what's happening. And that's very resonant with me. And I feel like it elevates it above something than like a trite kid's story.
And I think part of what you've just described perfectly illustrates the difference between a story being told to you and being immersed in experiencing a story. And like, as you point out with computer games, that immersion is so incredibly important because you don't want the player to be thinking, I'm sitting in a chair and I have to press this button. You want them to be engaged in the narrative that's unfolding, the action that's unfolding, or if it's a strategy game, like being invested in, and rather than, oh well, I could just reload, I can save scum. You want them to feel if one of the pawns dies that how can I have lost that one?
Yeah,
that's being involved in the story as opposed to watching someone play it online and you go, oh, they're very good at this. I quite enjoy it. That's more the story being told to you. And fiction runs the gamut between these different experiences. So Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. One of my favorite of your videos, honestly, is the video you did probably a while back now, where you took literally the first paragraph of Gardens of the Moon and like broke it down sentence by sentence and was like, look at what he's telling us here. Look how much is packed into this first paragraph. I think you talked for, I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes on just that one section, which is great. No, I'm complimenting you. It shows how much can be packed into environmental storytelling and the way that every word, every syllable isn't wasted. And I think that's part of the reason that we're so in love with these novels. But I think it points to the potential in all manner of storytelling to use everything at your disposal. You're not just explaining where something is set. You're showing setting as an extension of character. This is something that Erikson has spoken to you about a number of times on your channel as well, is how characterization. It's one of the things that's resonated so much to me. Is I think there's a quote that he said at one point to you about characterization is how characters react to their environment, or something. I'm not doing it justice, but something along those lines of who we understand who a character is by how they react to stimuli. And I think that is something that is absolutely applicable across a number of media, right? You could talk about video games in that way as well, and how you can communicate things to a player through how the environment affects them, how they have to interact with certain things. And it's such an interesting manner of expressing story. You're not just saying, hey, here's the plot. You're showing how all of these things interact and how all of those things impress upon the player or the reader or the audience.
And that's one of the fascinating, because one of the techniques is focalization, where you take exposition and you take the character point of view. If it's written in third person limited, the character is going to see the same scene as someone else, but they'll see it in their own way. So very simple, straightforward illustration. You have someone who is incredibly wealthy, from an incredibly wealthy background, who has all of this gold and jewels, and maybe they're a monarch of some kind. And you have someone else who is incredibly poor. Now, let's say they walk into your middle of the road hotel. The incredibly poor person might look at this and go, oh my, this hot and cold running water and these soft towels and everything is so clean and so wonderful. That's how they perceive the room. The incredibly wealthy person might be going, why am I in this hovel?
Right.
Because their perception of exactly the same thing can be radically changed because of one variable that you have changed, which is the level of wealth that they have. And you could do a fun experiment for your kids, Jeff, actually. A bowl of hot, not scalding, hotish water, a bowl of coldish water, and then a bowl in the middle of a mixture of the two. And you put one hand in the very warm water, one hand in the cold water. And then you put both in at the same time into the middle one. And your body register, one hand will register this as being cold and the other will register it as being warm. And
right.
that's just our own body reacting to the same stimuli, but in a different way. And one of my great loves in literature is when authors take advantage of that, where your healer character is paying attention to, oh, the herbs around that they can use, or that's what someone who is a bandit might be looking around for places where they can ambush. That's the first thing that they notice. Someone who is a guard is looking for where they might be ambushed from. That their profession, their age, their gender, their sexuality, all of these things can shift how they see the world. And I think that's something, Lana, you might be able to speak to this, that can be very difficult to encode into a computer game, because even if the character or the player has changed their character avatar, you would have to apply completely different filters to landscapes to do all of these things. And that's not how a lot of the mechanics of gameplay work.
Well, I think that you sort of the mechanics that you give the player to use in the different character that they might be playing would inform the way that they would interact with the world. But they'd probably, like, let's say, we're making a game like you just described. We've got, the assassin rogue character that's got to go ambush people. We have the tank that's got to stand guard and make sure there's nobody ambushing. We've got the support player that's ready to heal anybody up. If I'm playing the tank and I'm like in the middle, ready to like be in the thick of things and defend my team, I'm going to play so differently if I switch then to the rogue, where I think my first instinct would be like to be in the middle so I could like slice people, but I don't have, the stats to like withstand that, and I would get eviscerated myself immediately. And this, like the story that you then push people into is not necessarily about changing the landscape, but again, bringing that player in as a character and changing their perspective on what they need to do based upon what they're able to do and the way that they will find success in the game. I love those different archetypes, and in particular, like the way those archetypes are brought in through the Malazan books, because I could sit down and be like, oh, here's Kalam. He's like a rogue. The rogue, maybe like fighter kind of guy, and we've got Itkovian, kind of a support, kind of a tank. Like, I don't exactly know like what trope he is, but like, or what role that he would fill. But seeing these people go through, like in the niches that they have, it does remind me so much of like that tabletop experience, and seeing like the twists that are put on it, that I could like, there are things that just feel so human. I don't know how to like explain that. Like the ways that they're approaching situations sometimes are like so silly or comedic or just not how I would expect it at all, which like is how I feel most often when I'm like playing tabletop games with my friends, where I know what my character wants to do, and then somebody in my party is like, can I do this? And I'm like, that's a great, I never would have thought of that. And then I'm like, oh, is my character an idiot because I'm an idiot? Like, it's I see that like those glimpses, and like seeing how like the tabletop game space like is so informed, some like the way these characters are developed through this world. It's like different flavors of the same thing, and I think they all have their own challenges, but in the end you can get that experience in any of the genres.
Well, Jeff, in terms of, Lana just mentioned Kalam. If you were going to min-max an assassin character,
yeah,
Kalam is not how you design a
right.
typical assassin character.
Right.
Like, taking your GMing experience and your tabletop experience to talk about what Lana just raised.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah.
Malazan has a little has RPG elements in it because that was a gamed world. But what do you see when you look at it?
Oh man, that's one of the most fun things that came out of the discussion that we got to have with Mr. Erikson so far. And we're hoping to speak to him again very soon. But I love digging into that and how the world of Malazan grew out of play, which is so interesting because there are certainly things in the novels that I immediately recognize in that way of like, oh yeah, that completely aligns with my experience of tabletop. But then there are other things. One of the things I brought up to him is that, it tends to be the case that when you play a tabletop experience, you're starting with a level 1 character and you're progressing, and so you often get these stories that are, the little farm girl or farm boy turning into the savior of the world, right? And so that's one of the things that Erikson turns on its head in his work as well, is that you drop into the world and people are already level 20 or whatever the case may be. And I think that's pretty exciting. And then you talk about something like Kalama you brought up, where he's we talked about a bunch on our show. He's this hulking, huge, not exactly what you think of as the spindly little assassin that hangs in the shadows and stabs. He's this massive brute. And I love that. I love that Erikson constantly is doing that kind of thing, challenging your assumptions of class and character with regard to these fantasy tropes and gaming tropes. So yeah, it's a delight to constantly be looking at and how he uses magic and how the entire dynamic of the fantasy world is really throwing a lot of those things we assume to be true, or those things that just you have to have a wizard who's sort of fragile, and you have to have these. He very much uses the class structure, and oftentimes we'll refer to characters as their quote unquote class. Mm-hmm. But it's often not as you might expect if you're steeped in that genre. Again, it's so much fun to sort of rediscover that stuff and look at it with fresh eyes as he forces you to do.
Well, is there any chance that the character of Krupp, or an incarnation of Krupp, is going to start appearing in things that you're involved in now? Because
oh my God,
Krupp is one of those characters that the first time I read him, I was like, oh, he's just an, and then like some sort of fungus, he started to grow on me and I couldn't get rid of him. and now I've adopted the fungus. I've given it a name.
Well, just the way he talks is so fun. You can just tell that Erikson's having a ball, just with the choice of words and the way his sort of these sort of spaghetti like sentence structures that fall onto themselves, and it's so much fun to watch.
But there's 2 characters, and so maybe it's just because I personally revel in pointed and intentional annoyance of my husband at every possible opportunity, that Krupp and forgive me, terrible with names, the sort of I want to say housekeeper, that fiddler,
Pust. Yeah.
Pust. Like they talk inside of like this third person, and Krupp's is like this egotistical, like under the guise of humble and amazing and talented, handsome Krupp it's so obnoxious and delicious, and Pust is like the same thing but so stupid.
Yeah.
Like no, we'll never do that. We would definitely do that, and I've tricked them all into thinking that we won't.
Just speaking his subtext out loud constantly.
So funny. I feel like I don't know if it's gonna like show up in work that I create, but certainly in just how I annoy my husband on the reg, absolutely. I like immediately put that one in the bank.
Like both Pust and Krupp are examples of that sort of absurdism.
Yeah.
Yes.
you're looking at this series has a reputation for being dark and gritty
Right.
and epic, and then you have Krupp waving his arms, stuffing his face with pastries, speaking in
Yeah.
the third person. Puss comes stumbling in, revealing his inner monologue, which then does actually confuse people because they're like, does he know he's saying all of that? What
Yeah.
the balance between the humor and elements of absurdism, and then really quite poignant and harrowing things.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That, and it doesn't feel disjointed. It doesn't feel like it's seesawing. It feels part of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And effortless. It seems
Yeah.
effortless. Like he does all of it well. It's amazing.
And thinking about like, you know, again, like what sort of went against my expectations for the book, I never would have expected, like in our discussions of the book, to literally be like laughing so hard with Jeff, and seconds after both of us were like wiping our eyes from emotional tears. Like the way that those, like the extremes of emotions that I can feel in like scene over scene are so beautifully connected. I never, other than the Trey Guild intro, I never felt like I was jarred into something. Really beautiful connection of emotions.
Well, now that you've mentioned the TTG, but this is something that I genuinely enjoy about how you both discuss this, is because I think both of you reacted, let's just say, uh, negatively well, actually, no, it wasn't negatively. You didn't react positively to that introduction of the Trigal Tree. It felt mechanistic. It felt like it was imposing into the Chain of Dogs storyline. And yet you both discussed it and said, but this is why I felt it was off. This is why I felt it didn't work. And that that level of being able to identify, I didn't enjoy this, as opposed to, well, this is just bad and it's trash and Erikson can't write. And
Right.
that's one of the reasons why I enjoy listening to you both so much, because we will all like different aspects of writing and stories, even stories we all enjoy. We will maybe like different aspects and we will dislike different aspects. And I love being able to hear what other people have been put off by, because I'll go, well, that didn't bother me. Why didn't it bother me? And it gives me a new line of thought to pursue.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to thank you both for such wonderful discussions, even and pointing out things that you don't like.
Man,
Well, that's like Lana's favorite thing is to talk about things she doesn't like.
That's half my enjoyment of any media, is picking apart the pieces I hated about it. What's funny with the TTG one, like when we talked about that, I remember the comments being like, yeah, but the books were originally supposed to be like flipped, and like honestly it like goes through in the third book and it's fine. And at the time I was like, that doesn't make it like fine for me. Like, but now we've read the third book and I'm like, it's fine. I've like flipped my opinion on it, looking back at the whole experience. I'm like, yeah, I get it. TTG. That's what they do.
I agree that that's one of the things we've learned about Erikson, is that you go like, in retroactively, he'll make something work, and you go like, well, this maybe not landing with me right now, but I'm kind of going to just like float along with it, and see where it goes. And then inevitably you get to this place of like, I see what he was doing. Mm-hmm. I understand why that had to happen there. And I think that TTG is one example of that. Yeah.
Because again, it's something that seems so absurd.
Yes. Well, it is absurd. It is absurd. But he sort of revels in that, as you said. Like he throws in these absurd things at the same time we're talking about the most, grounded, harrowing, deeply felt stuff. And then there's something goofy that happens the next page, and somehow it all works together. It's incredible.
And of course, like everything is so well thought out. You go, yes, this is a series where we have these characters, and then we have undead dinosaurs with swords for arms, and then we have right. Back that up a second. What was that last one?
Yeah. You're not going to believe the scariest thing is these undead dinosaurs with swords for arms. Really? Because that sounds ridiculous. No. It's terrifying.
This other book, the book I'm listening to on audiobook, of course now I'm gonna forget the name of it. It's the Fafford and Grey Mouser, the second of those books. And I sort of listened to it while I'm going to sleep, and I was kind of dozing off, and then I woke up and I was listening to it, and it was talking about dinosaurs with swords for arms. And I was like, is this a thing that I don't know about? Is this like a
Really?
fantasy beast?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I was like, how is this possible that I'm like, where am I? Am I dreaming? Am I blending these two books together in my brain? Yeah, love it.
Well, the thing about authors is obviously they're all professional liars and professional thieves. They steal from everywhere.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't know this. It was a long running joke. Yeah, because you know about. Because I'm trying to be very careful because I don't want to spoil anything. But you know about Dragnapur and Amanda Rake's sword.
Yeah.
Yes.
And for years, Erikson was asked, did you get this from Michael Moorcock's Elric stories, the Eternal Champion series? Like, is that where you got it? Stormbringer, that sword. And he's like, I haven't read Elric. I haven't read Moorcock's books. I didn't get it from there. And of course, everyone forgot to say, Gideon C. Esselmont, who you were gaming with and is the co-creator of the world, has he read any Moorcock? For years, Erikson was like, why do people keep bringing this up? And Cam was just sitting there in the background going, maybe I should tell him.
That's amazing.
That's so funny.
But what I love then is like all of these different elements that authors bring, they give them their own unique spin. It's not that's so someone's already done that. You go, yeah,
right.
But someone's already done mages, someone's already done orcs, it's giving them your unique spin. And like, we see that in the best of computer games. That if you map out structurally the narrative that's going on, you go, oh, it's a series of fetch quests where the player's going to be given this, they have to go and get that thing, and then they need these ingredients, so they're going to go and farm that area, and then they're going to come back to combine it to get this. You can map it all out and you go, it is so tired and boring and mechanistic, but the skill is making it engaging, making it feel fun, making it feel immersive. And that's what I think the best storytellers do. It's not about trying to be, no one has ever told this story before, but understanding that there are unique ways to tell all stories.
Well, I think, first of all, I want to say me saying that, I thought it was like a remarkable coincidence. There was no way in like an indictment of like, that seems like meh. Just in case it came across that way. But I think, all art form, I forget whose quote it is, that like no art is ever like original. It's only reproduced or whatever. There's no like new art. It's like the famous feeling that people get. But you see it with video games all the time, where we take something that exists and you elevate it to like all the things that people wanted about that thing. I think it was EverQuest was like a big game that everybody was into, and then World of Warcraft was like, we could do that cleaner and better with better art, and they did. And people weren't like, that's the same game, or maybe they were at the time. I'm too young.
You don't remember it, but it was.
Yeah. But what World of Warcraft is to people is very much a different thing. And likewise with Final Fantasy 14, which is another MMO, but the characters, the world, the art style, like everything about it is so different that it is a different place to immerse yourself. And is it an MMO? You run around, you do quests, you do raids, whatever. Yeah, for sure. But different experiences, different communities, different reasons for wanting to be a part of them.
Yeah, one of the things about Malazan is that it really does feel like those novels are sort of in conversation with the whole of the genre. They're kind of assuming you have a certain level of familiarity with what you expect, and that's why I think it's so fun to experience those novels, is that they're playing on what you know and what you expect. And I think it's a conversation that it's having with you and your knowledge about the topic.
Yeah, like we had mentioned earlier with archetypes or the roles and functions of certain characters, that you can sometimes look at them and go, oh yeah, Kalam, he's the assassin. And then you think, well, if I was going to break him down in terms of stats, and you go, that's not how I would design an assassin character to lean into the mechanics of what I know an assassin rogue is going to be doing in the game. And there's so many of the characters in this that you go, if this was how I was going to design the character sheet, this is the wrong way around. They've done something different. They've
yeah
played around with it. The dumb mage. So Iskarol
Right.
passed a mage, and he seems stupid. Like,
right
and you can see then the dramatic storytelling potential in that, rather than the mechanistic economy of how and efficiency of solving a game puzzle. That there are different philosophies to the approach of the narrative, and I think this would be my one major aspect of the negative impact of gaming on fantasy narratives is the introduction of efficiency and min-maxing almost as a concept for how the narrative should be resolved. Don't introduce a power if that's not the power that is A, going to be explained, and then B, used in a very important way to solve an important aspect of the narrative.
Right.
The magic system, everything must be systematized. Like,
right
it's a story. Why does everything have to be a magic system? You go, Tolkien didn't have a system. Tolkien had magic, and that works fine. But it's infiltrated how we speak about it, because if you want to talk about the magic in anything now, the natural go-to phrase is, let's talk about the magic system.
yeah
Why do we automatically assume system? Why do we assume a mechanism?
yeah That's true, because magic, just the term magic sort of implies rule breaking, right? It's like, what are the rules of the rule breaking system?
But it's so necessary for a game. Otherwise, it would just be, oh, well, I just wave my hand and solve the problem.
You're trying to balance like the thematics that you want to be resonant with the realities of trying to make a game feel fair and feel and honestly just what you have to do to actually program that thing. It has to be systemic because it is it's a program. It needs to have rules so that it can function. My brain's immediately shorting out. Just I don't have like much to contribute there other than like, yeah, I agree with you. I think it really depends on the type of game that you have. There are beautiful moments, especially in games that do allow for like more sandbox play, and games that are possibly like more story driven, where it doesn't really matter so much the specific rules, because it's not about your stats, it's about the narrative that you're experiencing. And I think something that is beautiful and something I'm excited about for the future of games is that we have more opportunities to have a wider variety of experiences that aren't like point gun, bang, bang, I win.
Yeah.
We have experiences that you go to that are just for feeling cozy. We have experiences that you go to because you want to be immersed in a story. And we have experiences that are purely competitive and purely stat driven as well. And increasing that breadth of experiences, I think a lot of people's dreams is to get to the place where the systems aren't so visible. And it is about the immersion of the player.
And you know what? I should apologize, because I never meant to imply that all get, much in the same way that I get irked when people say about, oh, well, this is what fantasy is, and they give a very simplistic definition. I apologize. I didn't mean to imply that all gaming was like that.
Oh, no, I didn't take it that way.
But because one of the things I consider, you'd mentioned World of Warcraft earlier. And, at some point there was like 10, 12 million monthly subscribers to World of Warcraft. And when you think of the reach and impact that narrative approach, that story world, those ways of approaching the fantastic, 12 million monthly subscribers. And then you think of, oh, well, that book's very famous. How many copies has it sold? 1.5 million. 1.5 million in its entirety. 12 million a month. The impact.
What's the number one book in the New York Times bestseller list has sold like 10,000 copies? It's really sad, actually.
But I still think it's wonderful that people are experiencing different narratives and different narrative forms. But we can see how certain narrative types and approaches can be so impactful in how we think and rationalize and understand the thing in front of us. Because if you come from playing World of Warcraft or any of those big MMOs and you go, I want to read books set in this world, you do not want to read someone novelizing your party's quest, because that would be incredibly boring.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it wasn't when you played it. It was so immersive and fun. Like I played Dark Ages of Camelot and WoW, and it was so much fun to get together with friends and go and do things. But if someone wrote that out as a narrative, it would feel, oh, so you met up here and then you went there and then you killed those things and then you went there and then you killed those things. Wow.
Well, I don't know. I think one of the beauties of it, and maybe this happens more in tabletop gaming versus video games, but one of the things I was very surprised about when I started playing tabletop games is it felt like we developed a shared memory, and the way that we talked about it wasn't sort of mechanically in we did this and then we talked about it and then we went to the second place and we talked more and then we rolled, and then it was like we were in the town and then we heard there was a dragon and we fought the dragon, and then all of us have a shared memory about fighting a dragon. And it feels, I can picture it in my brain of like, remember jumping on it and all of us rolling so well that we were able to like cut its wings off and ground it and like make armor from it, and telling people as though we are like, we literally were the heroes going off and doing that this weekend. And all of us are like, yeah, that happened. Like that level of, I'm not telling the story about what happened. I'm telling you what happened. I don't know how to change the difference between those two sentences, but the level of like care and like how much it like strikes to the heart and becomes a piece of me versus me telling you it's more like me telling you about like a dream I had or something.
It's interesting too, because you talk about how like if you just described the step-by-step of the video game or the gaming experience, it wouldn't be very interesting. But the inverse is also true. And I think you can point to World of Warcraft as having, I think, faltered by going down the inverse of that path, which is they started telling these grand stories of the world, and you were just a person that got to observe it. Yes. You were just like, you got to walk up and watch the really important characters talk to each other and do the cool stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, that works when I'm reading a novel, when I'm watching a film, when I'm television series. That's what I want. I want to see these cool characters doing cool stuff. But when I'm playing the game, I want to do it. Yes, like, let me do it.
I had to kill 30 of those like field worms, and now I get to watch Thrall do the cool thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think it's very interesting that the medium, kind of can dictate what is compelling. I think I wouldn't want a novel written in the second person per se, but I mean, it could work, but potentially, but I think it's an interesting difference.
And that's the fun thing, that all of the different media have different strengths and have different weaknesses. And it doesn't mean that you can't do something that is in an area that it would be traditionally weak, because if you're aware of that, you mitigate, you pay attention to that in order to either manipulate it or play into it.
Right.
All of these wonderful ways of doing it, and the fluidity of tabletop, because there's no one way of playing a tabletop game with your friends. That you'll have a rules lawyer, and that may have been me in the past, but I am reformed. But or you can have people who are far more invested in just have a flowing interactive narrative that is based on everyone chipping in and having this communal experience, or a balance between the two. And there is a fluidity to tabletop role-playing game which is so difficult to replicate in any other media, because it is about that group dynamic right then and there in the room, or virtually, although virtually doesn't work quite as well.
I agree. There's some ineffable something that happens when you're in the same room. But that's been one of the things I've talked about a number of times, is that when first started, GMing for my friends, I was playing with a group of people who had primarily been video gamers. Like their entrance into interactive storytelling at all was through video games. And it was such a heavy lift to convey to them this notion that anything is possible on the tabletop, right? That they were so ingrained in this way of thinking of like, well, what does the game want from me, right? Because video games, it's like, well, you can do this or this or this. So which of those are going to do? And so what does the game want? Am I able to open that door? No. Okay, the game doesn't want me to go that way. Okay, which way does the game want me to go? And that mentality translated to tabletop, where it's like, okay, well, what do you want us to do? And it was hard to convince them, this is your game. You tell me what you want to do. And there's no rules to what you can and can't do. They would look at their available, actions and go, well, here's the 6 things I can do. Which one of them should I do in this situation? It's like, well, no, it's not about those 6 actions. It's about you describing how you'd like to engage with this environment and me telling you how well that goes, Mm-hmm. And that was a very difficult thing. And so I agree with you, AP, in a lot of sense that video games have had this sort of constraining influence on the minds of people who engage with the genre, to its detriment in a lot of ways. As much as I love video games, I do think that has happened.
Yeah, especially even like as somebody who's gamer into tabletop gamer, like, what are my 6 actions? I'm like, what is this? Persuasion? What I've got is knife and sword and a spell or whatever. Yeah. And so I'm like, somebody is here. They want to talk to me. I think that I should hit them with my knife. Their right. reaction to everything. I don't know how long it took me to realize that I can like convince people of things. I can basically like live my life as what this character would do. And that character doesn't always have to be the character that is going to stab anybody who comes within 5 feet of them.
So Lana, you're admitting to being a murder hobo. That's your style.
I've reformed. Now I am an archaeologist, linguist. Our party does a lot of talking. Almost everything is either us talking amongst each other about trying to like plan for every contingency, or just talking to somebody and being like, they must know more than this, and they're like, that's a rat that you are speaking to from the street.
Yes.
Because Jeff, you had mentioned something that made me think of one of the most frustrating things about certain computer games in level design. Your character who can double jump and do all of these things, and but I can't cross this small bench that's in my way.
Exactly.
Because the level design is, no, you're not allowed to go that way. So there's a small bench. You're like,
right.
I can jump. I have this attack move, and it's no, there's a force field extending up from this small bench.
Right.
Oh.
Yes. I agree with that. I often hate that, where it's like, there's some debris falling in the way. Yeah, I
have an axe.
Okay, I can walk. I can move debris or climb over debris. Nope, sorry, debris.
I blame level designers.
Yeah.
Level design. They're like children. They're there to be blamed.
Exactly.
And you can also harvest their organs.
Jeff, is this why you got fired from your last place of business?
Yes, but I got a sick kidney out of it.
Well,
excuse me.
And on that note, let me thank you both for this wonderful, frightening discussion about organ harvesting. Thank you, Jeff and Lana, so much for coming on and having this discussion. And I look forward to listening to you every week and listening to the jingle, which I may or may not be dancing along to at home.
Hey, so it's required.
So
thank you. Oh my goodness. This was so much fun. I feel like we could have gone for 4 more hours. I was having so much fun. Thank you, AP, for having us.
Yes, thank you so much.
And for those of you still watching, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for your continued support, and I will see you in the next one.